When Ashikaga Takauji helped topple the Kamakura shogunate in 1333, he expected to be rewarded. But Emperor Go-Daigo, eager to restore imperial rule in the Kinmu Restoration, refused to name Takauji shogun. Disillusioned, Takauji rebelled. In 1338, he seized Kyoto, installed a rival emperor, Emperor Komio, and was named shogun, founding the Ashikaga Muromachi shogunate. Go-Daigo fled south to Yoshino, establishing a southern court to challenge Takauji's northern court. For decades, Japan remained split between two imperial lines in a conflict known as the Nanbokucho period. While the Ashikaga held Kyoto and nominal power, they faced a twofold struggle: defeating the southern court and controlling the increasingly autonomous provincial lords, daimyos, who began acting as independent rulers. The shogunate's fortunes improved under Takauji's grandson, Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, who came to power in 1368. A brilliant diplomat and administrator, Yoshimitsu unified the court by brokering peace between the northern and southern courts in 1392, ending the dynastic schism. From his palace in Kyoto's Muromachi district, he expanded the authority of the shogunate, strengthened ties with powerful daimyos, and fostered a golden age of court culture. But after Yoshimitsu's death in 1408, central authority eroded. In 1467, the Unin War erupted, a brutal civil conflict sparked by a succession dispute within the Ashikaga clan. Feuding daimyos leveled Kyoto, plunging the capital into chaos. Though the war officially ended in 1477, it left the shogunate fatally weakened. The country disintegrated into hundreds of competing domains, each ruled by warlords. This was the beginning of the Sengoku period, Japan's warring states era, marked by nearly constant conflict. Daimyos like Yasuji Kenshin and Takeda Shingen emerged as powerful warlords, commanding vast armies in pursuit of territorial control. Kyoto became a symbol of imperial decline, its temples and palaces overshadowed by battlefields and burning towns. In this era of chaos, new forces emerged. Peasant uprisings swept the countryside. Buddhist warrior monks, fiercely loyal to their temples, raised armies to challenge daimyo power. Meanwhile, the ninja entered the popular imagination, stealthy spies and assassins, trained in guerrilla warfare and deception. Shrouded in secrecy, their true exploits remain elusive, but their legends have endured for centuries. The Ashikaga shogunate continued to exist in name, but real power had fractured. Japan had become a patchwork of warring states, and the dream of national unity seemed all but lost. In the midst of Japan's civil war and disunity, a twist of fate changed its course forever. In 1543, a Chinese junk carrying 3 Portuguese traders was blown off course and landed on the remote island of Tanegashima, just south of Kyushu. They were the first Europeans to set foot in Japan, bringing with them exotic goods and something even more transformative: the musket. The Japanese quickly recognized the weapon's potential. Within just over a decade, by 1556, Japanese armies had integrated more than 300,000 muskets into their forces. This simple Portuguese matchlock would revolutionize warfare in Japan. But the Europeans brought more than weapons. In 1549, the Jesuit missionary Francis Xavier arrived in Kyushu. His mission was not trade, but souls. Christianity began to take root rapidly, and by the late 16th century, more than 350,000 Japanese had converted to the new faith. The Portuguese were eager to trade, and Japan's fractured political landscape provided opportunity. Warlords, daimyos, competed fiercely to attract the coveted black ships and their wealth. One such daimyo, Omura Sumitada, went further than most. In 1562, he became the first Japanese lord to convert to Christianity, adopting the baptismal name Dom Bartolomeo. Omura allowed the Portuguese to trade in the port of Yakasura, but his conversion provoked backlash. In 1564, a Buddhist uprising destroyed the port. Still, European influence only grew. In 1561, the powerful daimyo Otomo Sorin, another Christian convert, formed a military alliance with the Portuguese. With their support, he launched an assault on Moji Castle, backed by 3 Portuguese ships, 900 crewmen, and 50 cannons. It marked the first bombardment of Japanese soil by foreign ships. European involvement wasn't always welcome. In 1565, at the Battle of Fukuda Bay, Daimyo Matsura Takanobu attacked two Portuguese trading ships at Hirado port. The Portuguese survived but retreated. The incident spurred them to find a safer port, Nagasaki. In 1571, Omura Sumitada granted land in Nagasaki, then a modest fishing village, to the Jesuits. They built a chapel and school, turning it into a center of Christianity and international trade. By 1579, Nagasaki had grown into a town of 400 houses, home to a growing population of Japanese Christians and Portuguese settlers. Some Portuguese even married and settled permanently. Fearing Nagasaki might fall to his rival Matsura Takanobu, Sumitada took an extraordinary step. In 1580, he deeded the entire city to the Jesuits. It became a Christian enclave within a war-torn land. As missionary activity expanded, so did the need to communicate. Jesuits like João Rodrigues immersed themselves in Japanese language and culture. By 1603, they had compiled and published a Japanese-Portuguese dictionary in Nagasaki, the first such dictionary ever made between a Western and East Asian language. Trade, technology, faith, and language all flowed through this unexpected cultural exchange. Japan had entered a new era, and Nagasaki stood at the heart of a rapidly changing world. Despite the backdrop of nearly constant warfare, Japan's economy continued to grow during the Muromachi period. The seeds of prosperity planted during the Kamakura era had taken root, and by 1450, the country's population had surged to nearly 10 million, a dramatic rise from the 6 million recorded at the end of the 13th century. Commerce flourished, both domestically and with neighboring countries such as China and Korea. Markets expanded, cities grew, and new trade routes crisscrossed the archipelago. The traditional barter system slowly gave way to a currency-based economy, as local daimyos and other factions began minting their own coins, accelerating Japan's economic modernization. Amid the chaos of war, a cultural renaissance quietly unfolded. It was during this time that some of Japan's most enduring and iconic art forms took shape. Ink-wash painting conveyed depth and emotion through simplicity. The practice of ikebana, or flower arrangement, found spiritual beauty in nature's transience. The tea ceremony became a meditative ritual of hospitality and humility, while bonsai and Japanese gardens offered miniature, idealized landscapes that reflected harmony and impermanence. On the stage, no theater emerged, blending music, drama, and poetry into a hauntingly minimalist form of performance that still captivates audiences today. Ironically, this cultural golden age was not led by a powerful ruler, but by one of the weakest Ashikaga shoguns, Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Though ineffective as a political or military leader, Yoshimasa became a passionate patron of the arts. From his retirement villa, Ginkakuji, the Silver Pavilion, he helped nurture the aesthetic ideals that would shape Japanese high culture for centuries. In this paradox of swords and serenity, Japan's Muromachi period stands as a testament to the resilience of culture amid conflict. In the turbulent second half of the 16th century, Japan began to reunify under the leadership of two formidable warlords, Oda Nobunaga and his brilliant successor Toyotomi Hideyoshi. This transformative era, known as the Azuchi Momoyama period, takes its name from the grand castles they built: Azuchi Castle, Nobunaga's headquarters, and Momoyama Castle, from which Hideyoshi ruled. Nobunaga was the daimyo of Owari, a relatively small province. He first stunned Japan in 1560, when his forces, vastly outnumbered, achieved a stunning victory over the powerful Imagawa Yoshimoto at the Battle of Okahazama. This moment catapulted Nobunaga onto the national stage, where he quickly gained a reputation for military genius and ruthless ambition. To secure his power, Nobunaga embraced Christianity as a political tool, undermining the powerful Buddhist institutions that opposed him and cultivating ties with European arms merchants. He adopted muskets on a massive scale and trained his soldiers in innovative tactics far ahead of their time. Rejecting the rigid social hierarchy of the past, Nobunaga promoted talent over birthright, most notably a peasant servant named Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who rose to become one of his top generals. In 1568, Nobunaga marched into Kyoto, bringing an end to the weakened Ashikaga shogunate and signaling the start of the Azuchi Momoyama period. He was well on his way to unifying the country when, in 1582, his rise was cut short, betrayed and assassinated by his own retainer, Akechi Mitsuhide, in a surprise attack. Into the power vacuum stepped Hideyoshi. He swiftly avenged Nobunaga by defeating Akechi and emerged as Japan's new unifier. Over the next decade, Hideyoshi completed the task his master had begun, subjugating Shikoku, Kyushu, and finally the Hojo stronghold in eastern Japan. Hideyoshi's rule was as transformative as it was total. He disarmed the peasantry, restricted the power of daimyos, persecuted Christians, and implemented a comprehensive land survey. Most importantly, he enacted laws that froze the social order, forbidding peasants and samurai from changing class. This effectively freed Japan's slaves, as all who cultivated land were now legally classified as commoners. With Japan firmly under his control, Hideyoshi turned his gaze outward. Dreaming of an Asian empire, he launched two massive invasions of Korea in 1592 and 1597, hoping to eventually conquer China. Despite initial successes, his forces were repelled by combined Chinese and Korean resistance, and the war dragged on until Hideyoshi's death in 1598. Hideyoshi had hoped to secure his legacy through his young son, Toyotomi Hideori, and ordered his top generals to support the boy's rule. But with the great unifier gone, loyalties fractured. Soon, Japan was once again plunged into war, this time between the Toyotomi loyalists and the powerful Tokugawa Ieyasu, a seasoned daimyo and former ally of Hideyoshi. In 1600, Ieyasu claimed a decisive victory at the Battle of Sekigahara, cementing his dominance over Japan. 3 years later, in 1603, he was appointed shogun by the emperor, ushering in over 2.5 centuries of Tokugawa rule, a period of peace, isolation, and enduring stability. The Edo period, 1603 to 1868, was a time of unprecedented peace and stability in Japan, ruled tightly and effectively by the Tokugawa shogunate. With the imperial court sidelined in Kyoto, real power shifted to Edo, modern-day Tokyo, where in 1603, Emperor Go-Yozei appointed Tokugawa Ieyasu as shogun. Although Ieyasu formally abdicated just 2 years later to secure the succession for his son, the Tokugawa dynasty was firmly established. Still, consolidating control took time. In 1609, to punish perceived slights, the shogunate authorized the Satsuma domain to invade the Ryukyu kingdom. Their victory initiated over 2.5 centuries of dual subordination for the Ryukyu Islands, paying tribute to both Satsuma and China. Then in 1615, Ieyasu completed his rise to dominance with the siege of Osaka, extinguishing the last resistance of the Toyotomi clan. To maintain their grip, the Tokugawa implemented sweeping political reforms. The laws for the military houses sharply curtailed daimyo independence. A central innovation was the alternate attendance system, Senkinkotai, which required daimyos to reside in Edo every other year, leaving their families behind as virtual hostages when they returned home. While the daimyos retained some autonomy in their domains, these measures ensured their loyalty. The shogunate's central government, headquartered in the rapidly expanding city of Edo, which soon became the largest city in the world, was supported by senior counselors known as Roju, and staffed by samurai bureaucrats. Meanwhile, the emperor in Kyoto remained a symbolic figure, richly supported by the state, but stripped of all political authority. Social control was harsh and unyielding. The Tokugawa legal system imposed gruesome punishments, including crucifixion, beheading, and boiling alive, even for minor crimes. However, members of the samurai or aristocracy were often allowed to perform seppuku, a ritualized form of suicide by disembowelment, viewed as a more honorable death. Religious control was equally ruthless. Fearing Christian influence, the shogunate gradually cracked down on the faith. After the Christian-led Shimabara Rebellion in 1638, Christianity was banned outright, its followers persecuted or killed. The third Tokugawa shogun, Iemitsu, then imposed the infamous Sakoku closed country policy, barring Japanese citizens from traveling abroad or returning, and prohibiting the construction of ocean-going vessels. All foreign contact was strictly limited. Only the Dutch, considered politically harmless, were permitted to maintain a single trading post on the artificial island of Dejima in Nagasaki. Alongside limited trade with China and Korea, This kept Japan isolated for over 2 centuries. Despite this isolation, foreign contact wasn't entirely severed. In 1600, the English navigator William Adams arrived in Japan, becoming the first Englishman to set foot in the country, accompanied by his Dutch second mate Jan Huysen. Adams earned the trust of Tokugawa Ieyasu, was granted samurai status, and became a key advisor on foreign affairs. His extraordinary story inspired James Clavell's novel and television series Shogun. Meanwhile, under Tokugawa rule, Japan's population doubled in the first 100 years, reaching 30 million by the 18th century, driven by improvements in agriculture and rural stability. Economic growth followed, supported by the construction of roads, standardized coinage, and the abolition of internal tolls, all of which facilitated commerce and enriched urban merchants and artisans. Still, about 90% of Japanese people remained rural. One of the most transformative legacies of the Edo period was a surge in literacy and numeracy. Private schooling, often connected to temples and shrines, flourished, eventually driving literacy rates to around 30%, possibly the highest in the world at the time. The result was a vibrant publishing industry, producing hundreds of titles annually. Numeracy, too, improved significantly. According to age-heaping studies, a method of measuring numerical awareness, Japan's population rivaled the most advanced parts of Europe, such as England and the Netherlands. This well-educated and numerate society, though tightly governed and culturally insular, quietly laid the foundations for the economic transformation that would come in the 19th century when Japan, seemingly overnight, would modernize and emerge as a global power. The Edo period was not only an era of political stability, but also one of extraordinary cultural flourishing. As the merchant class grew in wealth and prominence, they began to channel their resources into the arts and leisure, giving rise to a vibrant and hedonistic urban culture known as the ukiyo, the floating world. This ephemeral lifestyle, focused on fleeting pleasures, became a central theme in both literature and visual art. The ukiyo-zashi, or tales of the floating world, were popular novels that explored this urban culture, while ukiyo-e, woodblock prints depicting courtesans, kabuki actors, landscapes, and scenes of daily life, evolved into one of Japan's most iconic artistic traditions. Over time, ukiyo-e became increasingly sophisticated, incorporating multiple printed colors and intricate detail. Urban centers such as Edo, Kyoto, and Osaka became hubs of entertainment. Theatrical forms like kabuki, colorful and dramatic live-action theater, and bunraku, a highly skilled form of puppet theater, captivated wide audiences. These performances were accompanied by kura, short songs, and music from the shamisen, a three-stringed instrument introduced to Japan around 1600. The haiku, a concise yet profound poetic form, also flourished during this period. Its greatest master, Matsuo Basho, 1644 to 1694, elevated the haiku to high art, capturing moments of nature and human experience with elegance and restraint. The period also saw the emergence of a new class of female entertainers, the geisha. Skilled in music, dance, and conversation, geisha became central figures in the world of refined entertainment. Contrary to modern misconceptions, their role was not sexual. Geisha did not sell their bodies, but rather their artistry and wit. Philosophically, the Tokugawa regime was heavily shaped by Neo-Confucianism, which provided a framework for social order and governance. The state promoted a rigid class hierarchy, dividing society into four official classes based on the four occupations: samurai, peasants, artisans, and merchants. At the top were the samurai, who styled themselves as the moral elite and claimed adherence to Bushido, the way of the warrior, a code emphasizing loyalty, discipline, and honor. This structured, yet dynamic society fostered a rich cultural legacy that would echo through Japanese history, shaping everything from modern art and literature to social norms and national identity. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, cracks began to show in the once sturdy foundations of Tokugawa rule. The explosive agricultural growth that had fueled early Edo prosperity and the government's inability to effectively respond to the devastating Tenpo famines of the 1830s further eroded public trust. Peasant unrest flared across the countryside, while government revenues declined. In a desperate bid to balance its budget, the shogunate cut the stipends of its already impoverished samurai, many of whom were forced to take on side jobs just to survive. This growing discontent among the warrior class would soon prove a decisive force in the collapse of the Tokugawa regime. At the same time, new ideas and intellectual currents began to circulate throughout Japan. Western knowledge, trickling in through Dutch merchants at Nagasaki, gave rise to a new field of study known as Rangaku, or Dutch learning. One of its most influential figures, the physician Sugita Jinpaku, helped revolutionize Japanese understanding of human anatomy by translating and applying Western medical texts. Meanwhile, a different intellectual movement was taking root, Kokugaku, or national learning, spearheaded by scholars like Motoori Norinaga and Hirata Atsutane. This school of thought celebrated what it claimed were authentic Japanese values, rooted in Shinto traditions and the divine authority of the emperor. In rejecting the foreign-born philosophy of Neo-Confucianism, Kokugaku inspired a powerful nationalist sentiment, glorifying Japan's ancient age of the gods. This brewing ideological ferment collided with a geopolitical crisis in 1853 when Commodore Matthew C. Perry arrived with a fleet of American warships, demanding that Japan end its centuries-long policy of isolation. Faced with superior firepower, the Tokugawa shogunate had little choice but to capitulate, agreeing to Perry's demands to open Japanese ports to U.S. ships. Soon, other Western powers followed, forcing Japan to sign a series of unequal treaties that stripped it of tariff autonomy and legal jurisdiction over foreign nationals. These humiliations shocked the nation and ignited outrage, especially in the powerful southern domains of Satsuma and Chashu. In those regions, samurai increasingly rallied around the slogan Sano Joy, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, a cry that combined nationalist fervor with open defiance of the shogunate. Inspired by Kokugaku ideals, samurai in Satsuma and Chashu formed a political and military alliance aimed at overthrowing the Tokugawa regime. When Tokugawa Yoshinobu became shogun in 1866, he inherited a crumbling political order. Just 2 years later, in 1868, the Allied domains persuaded the young Emperor Meiji to issue a rescript calling for the end of Tokugawa rule. Their armies marched on Edo, and the Boshin War, 1868 to 1869, erupted. Though brief, the war was decisive.